Hello there. I am your host, Santiago Gabriel, and welcome to the Strawberry Ink Network. Whether you're just tuning in or you've been listening for a while already, I know I have been out for some time, just World Cup stuff and life in general. I make music outside of this podcasting theme, but I'm glad to be back, and I am back with something that could be going viral at the moment, but currently the headlines are pointed towards President Trump as he fell asleep during Senator Lindsey Graham's funeral, the most homophobic senator in history, probably, at least modern history, which thankfully he is deceased. We no longer have to hear him running his mouth for no reason and influencing all the narrow minded immigrants or even U.S. citizens who are willing to feed into that homophobia. And what's hit the headlines even more is the operation that Trump is planning out in order to get Haitian illegal immigrants deported. They came in with a valid document thanks to the Biden administration, but now I guess the documents are no longer valid. Well, having Biden inside that Oval Office was silly anyways. But right now, the dramatic story I will be discussing in this episode has a lot to do with politics. In particular, the gun violence debates and gun law stuff. But listener discretion is advised. These topics are difficult to discuss, and as well, the story may sound pretty retarded. So, it was the morning of September 4th, 2024. Something huge and chaotic occurred in Georgia, just outside of Atlanta. History unfolded inside Apalachee High in Winder, Georgia. So, this is a public school that had never had something so violent occur inside the building. Let's go through the timeline. Georgia law requires public schools to conduct at least one active shooter drill every school year. That drill must take place within the first weeks of the school year, and the deadline every school year is October 1st. So this has to be done while it's warm out, which in Georgia, it's warm most of the time. It's not like Ohio or Michigan where the weather can be harsh right when November kicks in. Georgia also has a relatively permissive firearm policy, a set of laws, which is a lot less strict compared to several other states in the US. Hunting in Georgia is fairly common, and many parents teach their kids how to safely handle firearms from a young age. One of those parents was Colin Gray, who had a son in that school. On that morning of September 4th, classes had already begun when school officials received a phone call threatening shootings at 5 different schools. The caller stated that Apalachee High would be the first one. Law enforcement responded, but the cops were unable to immediately determine who had made this phone call because the threat could not be quickly verified. The school they continued, and the campus was not placed into lockdown. However, parents were informed via email, at least according to the administration, that a threat had occurred, but was under control. During first period, a student named Colt Gray reportedly asked in class, how the school would respond to an active shooter. Staff members also noticed what they believed was an unusually heavy backpack being carried by the student. An email was sent to school administrators reporting both concerns. The administrators began discussing the situation, but did not immediately remove Colt from class. Instead, they planned to locate him after second period and suspend him while investigating whether he had been connected to the threatening phone call. Shortly before 10 a.m., Colt sent a text message to his father. It read, "I'm sorry, it's not your fault. You're not to blame for any of it." Around the same time, Colin Gray realized that one of the family's guns was missing. He contacted Colt's grandmother, who did not know where the weapon was. She claimed she did not take it. Colt's mother, Marcy Gray, who was with the grandmother, also claimed she was not aware of where the gun went. She tried to call Colt, but he did not answer. She then sent him a text message, one after another, asking him whether he had taken that firearm, but she received no response. During second period, Colt left class, grabbing a pass and claiming to be going to see a school counselor. According to investigators, mainly the school staff, he never went to see a counselor. Instead, he went into a bathroom. That's what the surveillance footage shows. And he took his backpack with him. He only left a notebook behind in the classroom. This was suspicious. If he was going to speak to a counselor, why would he need to take his backpack with him? He spent about 20 minutes inside the restroom preparing the gun that he had brought from home. That's why his bag was so heavy, because he had a firearm inside. The school administration, meanwhile, prepared to remove him from class. Colt's mother, Marcy, contacted the school, warning staff that there was an emergency involving her son. School officials hurried to find him. By then, he had already disappeared from class. Therefore, the administrators searched the nearest restroom where Colt had been actually. However, he had been hiding inside one of the stalls, so the administrators did not spot any gun inside this bathroom, even though it was there. They mistakenly pulled out the wrong student, someone with a similar name, Colton Gray, who had also gone to the restroom. Colton had nothing to do with any of the drama unfolding inside the school. As the wrong student was being pulled out, Colt remained inside the bathroom. As Colton was being interrupted and questioned for no reason, Colt left the bathroom with his fully loaded gun, wearing 2 yellow gloves, and walking with a poster board wrapped around his torso. Around this time, Colt texted his mother, "I'm sorry." Marcy called Colt's father, Colin, and recommended that he leave work immediately to go to the school to pick Colt up. However, it was too late. Colt returned to class and knocked on the locked door. A student walked toward the entrance to let him in, but before opening it, she noticed that he was holding a firearm. She warned her teacher, "He's got a gun." The classroom door remained closed. Unable to enter, Colt walked to another classroom where he gained access. Moments later, gunfire erupted. He then started running around the school, shooting at people exiting. Inside a classroom that had received 15 rounds, a student, Christian Angulo, was killed. Several others were wounded inside this room around Christian, who had died at the scene. Several more kept getting shot as they were leaving the rooms to try to evacuate the building. This chaos could have been prevented if the school administration, the staff in particular, the counselor's department, was not flooded with nut jobs working there. Which in the American public school system, those school counselors in charge of handling petty drama and scheduling classes can do a pretty non-sensual job. They could perform pathetically and get into your business. The who are you chatting with online? Why were you not on time to class? How come you said this and made this other person uncomfortable? They just make things more toxic. Well, at least this is not Ohio. No, that's retarded. Anyways, the school administration performed their jobs in such a retarded way that the shooting just kept going on and on. People kept getting shot. Are you serious? Parents paying tax money for this monkey business, paying to have their kids be shot easily. Well, let's continue on. Several teachers in the school immediately activated their emergency panic buttons attached to their ID badges. Across the campus, classroom smartboards started to freeze. Large red letters appeared on them, reading "Hard Lockdown." Because the school had not yet conducted its required active shooter drill that school year, some students initially believed this was only a practice exercise. They believed this was that drill. Several teachers were confused and stepped into the hallway trying to understand what was happening, as they had received no email from the administration informing them about the drill. Little did they know this was not even a drill, this was actually a mass shooting. Among those teachers heading to the hallway was math teacher and football coach Richard Aspinwall. He was shot in the chest. Students managed to pull him back into the classroom and attempted to stop the bleeding. Despite their efforts, he died inside the room. Apparently, Colt was shouting, "Open up," in order to get people to open the classroom doors to allow him to shoot more. He also intended to draw the victims, his victims, into the hallways before shooting them. He was doing what he could to get more people. Meanwhile, hundreds of 911 calls flooded emergency dispatchers reporting an active shooter inside the school. Due to the Uvalde shooting prior to this, about 2 years before this, where there was a very slow police response. These law enforcement officers in this area knew that they had to get to the school very quickly, and they did. They entered the building. That is when Colt surrendered without further violence. He was taken into custody at the school. As the officers cleared the building, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp directed emergency responders to evacuate everyone from the campus and secure the scene. Police were also sent to Colt Gray's home. Students informed the officers that there were several victims inside, that two had already died inside the school. The dead bodies of Richard Aspinwall and Christian Angulo were located and removed. Inside, there were 7 injured but still alive. They were rushed to the ER for surgery, emergency surgery. The hospitals serving them were Piedmont Athens and Grady Memorial in Atlanta. These 7 were 1 teacher and 6 students. 2 additional students were treated for injuries sustained while evacuating the building despite not being shot. Many offers were made to the students to speak to someone in order to calm themselves despite the chaotic scene. These offers even were for those going to schools around the area in case they were having a panic attack. And in fact, many people did have panic attacks. In particular, many of the students. Therefore, counselors and paramedics were outside to assist them, as well as police officers with experience in psychology. Chaos was all over the area, not just inside the building. The police would start searching the building deeper. They found 2 more dead bodies. The school staff identified them as student Mason Schermerhorn and math teacher Cristina Irimie. The death toll was established as 4. By that afternoon, the building was empty and the shooting was over. Colt Gray, upon being taken into custody, was transported to the Gainesville Regional Youth Detention Center, where he was booked with 4 counts of felony murder. Meanwhile, the investigators confronted his father, Colin, as he got home from work. Colin was compliant and accompanied the officers to the Barrow County Sheriff's Administration Annex for questioning. According to investigators, he failed to properly secure the firearm used in the shooting. These actions allowed his son Colt to gain access to this gun and take it to school. At this point, while being questioned at the annex, he too became a suspect in this shooting, despite not physically being inside the school during the chaos. Investigators also revealed that the FBI had previously investigated online threats linked to an account associated with Colt Gray. According to the FBI, this was a Discord account which had sent messages threatening to commit a school shooting and had idolized Sandy Hook shooter Adam Lanza, who, as we know, several years ago shot a bunch of kids at a Newton, Connecticut school and then killed himself. The FBI claimed that they did send law enforcement to Colt's home after these messages were tied to him, and that Colt did speak to the law enforcement, but there was insufficient evidence to charge him. The body cam footage of this questioning was publicly released. It took place right next to the front door of the home. Colin was also involved. He did not sent the messages, but he did speak to the law enforcement officials as well. However, during that interrogation, he left the scene several times and went back inside, leaving Colt alone in the discussion. Colin would often come outside with a cell phone on his hand to make sure there was nothing more crazy going on. And he was often staring at his phone during the questioning. However, he never showed sympathy towards any shooter, and he claimed that he'd be pissed if his son sent any threats. This Discord account was banned on May of 2023 by the 31st day of that month. So, action is being taken for messages idolizing school shooters, but not for messages written by pedophiles to lure the youth. The day after the shooting was a critical day. A criminal probe within the state of Georgia was officially established by the GBI. These investigators of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation believed that Colt committed the shooting in order to be famous within the true crime community, and that he admired Parkland shooter Nicholas Cruz. This phrase, true crime community, is currently making the headlines and being discussed by several politicians across the United States. It's basically an online community discussing crime, true crime, and idolizing the suspects. So, an informative podcast is not part of the true crime community. But if the podcast idolizes a criminal defendant, what this show has done at times, yes, that is true crime community. So if you're listening to me right now, welcome to the true crime community. I've got to admit, I have idolized criminal defendants and killers, but I do it for the correct reason. I do it because those defendants that I've been idolizing have shown opposition towards pitiful authority, towards not jobs with high roles in society. If a Columbus, Ohio police officer got murdered, or if their headquarters were bombed, even the Hilliard police headquarters, if they received a bomb, or if Adolf Hitler reincarnated and executed all the white trash, you think a part of my heart would not be happy? I was happy when Faith Rankin's mother died. So yeah, long live true crime community. And by the way, I just mentioned Nicholas Cruz. This is what the investigators claimed. Colt Gray had a poster in his room which stated 19-year-old kills 17 at Florida MSD school, which is the Majority Stoneman Douglas Public School in Parkland. I made an episode about that shooting a while back ago, and this shooter, Nicholas Cruz, is currently at the Union Correctional Institution in Rayford, Florida, doing life in prison as well as hundreds of other years. So, 2 days after the shooting, September 6th, Colt appeared before Barrow County Superior Court Judge Hury Mingledorf. The judge ordered that he remain in custody without bond to await trial. After Colt was walked out of the courtroom, his father, Colin, was walked inside. Judge Mingledorf granted the father a $500,000 bond. Despite the bond being set, it was too high for Colin to post it, and he remained in custody to await trial just like his son. The judge did that on purpose so Colin would not be released and tamper with the evidence. District Attorney Brad Smith, serving Barrow County, claimed that his office needed some time to review the evidence and possibly charge the pair with more severe crimes. However, they did confirm that they'd be taken on the probe. Brad Smith would be assisted by his assistant DA, Patricia Brooks. Both would prosecute together. On October 17th, the prosecution met with a grand jury. That grand jury, on that day, October 17th, 2024, returned indictments against both Colt and his father. Colt was indicted on 4 confirmed felony murder charges, 4 of malice murder, 18 first-degree cruelty offenses, 25 assault offenses, and 4 terrorism offenses, all felonies. His father, Colin, was indicted on 2 counts of second-degree murder, 2 counts of involuntary manslaughter, 20 cruelty offenses, and 3 counts of reckless conduct, also all felonies. Shortly after the indictments were reached, just before 2 p.m. on that day, Judge Joseph Booth officially unsealed both indictments. Both Colt and Colin refused to return to court in order to enter their pleas to the charges. Colin was facing 27 and Colt was facing about 55 charges. Colt's public defenders, Charlton Allen and Latoya Williams, 5 days after the indictment, submitted paperwork to the court indicating that he would be pleading not guilty to the charges. The following month, on November 21st, a hearing was held just among the attorneys in order to discuss what Colin's pleas would be to the charges. Obviously, he was not present. However, he had hired 2 private attorneys to defend him, Brian Hobbs and Jimmy Berry. Both submitted not guilty pleas on his behalf. The pleas from both Colt and the father were confirmed by Judge Joseph Booth. Now, after so many delays, gun laws debates, one thing was clear: the school counselors that day performed a real retarded job. This is no longer a should we make gun laws stricter? Maybe yes, but at least don't hire stupid people to perform these jobs at these schools. I mean, it's not only Georgia, it's several states. Some states are more stupid than others. Even socially, the, can you please get away from me? At a park. If you don't want to be around people, then don't go to a park. Don't go out to public. And why would a human being act so strange? How pathetic. We really need an Adolf Hitler back in society, not to kill Jews, but to kill exclusively to execute the scums of society. Now, finally, after waiting so long, a trial finally occurred in 2026. On February 9th, the trial of Colt Gray began. Well, jury selection first. A jury was seated, consisting of 12 members and 3 alternates. The jury selection proceedings lasted for 3 days and took place at the Hull County Superior Court. This was done far away from where the shooting occurred in order to find impartial jurors. Those jurors were afterwards sent over to the Barrow County Superior Court where the trial was meant to be held. On February 16th, just after Valentine's Day, the trial officially kicked off. Then, about a month later, on March 3rd, Colin was found guilty on all charges. At this point, his bond was officially revoked. Colin's defense requested to restart the trial on February 23rd, just before he was convicted. But Judge Nicholas Preem refused to do so. So then came another set of delays. Colt was supposed to go to trial October of this year. However, very recently this month, on July 24th, he pleaded guilty to his charges without reaching a deal. This was due to overwhelming evidence. The proceedings to sentence him would start on that very day after he pleaded guilty and continue on for the next 2 days. Then, on the 28th, Judge Preem officially handed down a sentence for him. 4 terms of life in prison without parole for the Malice murders, 20 years for each of the remaining offenses, except the terrorist and felony murders offenses, those were merged. Some of the terms were concurrent and some consecutive. Therefore, in other words, he received a total of natural life in prison plus 20 years. Then, days later, on July 30th, just hours ago actually, Colin received a sentence as well. Judge Preem sentenced him to 15 years in prison for each second-degree murder conviction, 10 years for each involuntary manslaughter conviction, 10 years for each cruelty offense, and 1 year for each reckless conduct conviction. All prison terms were ordered to be run concurrently. The 10-year manslaughter sentence is suspended. Therefore, he will have to serve that as probation. Once again, in other words, he got 15 years in prison plus 10 years probation, which he will have to do after his release. As of right now, both Colt and Colin remain in custody. Yes, they may appeal. It looks like Colt's next step is withdrawing his plea, and Colin's next step is asking Judge Preem to throw out his conviction. Both may even appeal to higher courts, even federal courts. However, if those plans will move forward, they are pending as of right now, and both remain at the same facilities that they were first booked into. Colt in Gainesville and Colin at the Barrow County Detention Center. The Georgia Bureau of Prisons stated that they may be transferred into their official state prisons in 10 days. I will keep you updated throughout the next episodes of Strawberry Ink. Thank you for listening. Take care and have a good rest of your day.